Welcome to Storytime with Miss Maucotel. Tonight we will be reading The Composer is Dead by Lemony Snicket. The composer is dead. Composer is a word which here means a person who sits in a room muttering and humming and figuring out what notes the orchestra is going to play. This is called composing. But last night, the composer was not muttering. He was not humming. He was not moving or even breathing. This is called decomposing. The composer's death was very suspicious, and so the inspector was called in to find the murderer or murderers and haul them off to jail. I will begin by interviewing all the usual suspects, the inspector said. Like all people in his line of work, this composer had many enemies lurking in the orchestra. They can lurk all they like, but I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them if they are lurking in the strings. I will find them if they are lurking in the brass. I will find them if they're lurking in the woodwinds. I will find them if they are lurking in the percussion section. I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them. The inspector was a very handsome and intelligent person, not unlike myself. I swear on my own intelligence and good looks, the inspector said, I will solve this terrible crime against humanity and/or classical music. And with an intelligent, if somewhat flamboyant gesture, he reached into his pocket and took out his notebook he used for all official business. First, I will interrogate the strings, he cried. Strings? Where were you on the night in question? The violins answered first, of course. The violin section is divided into the first violins, who have the trickier parts to play, and the second violins, who are more fun at parties. We were performing a waltz, said the violins. We played graceful melodies so the ladies and gentlemen could spin around and around and around until they felt dizzy and somewhat nauseous. They kept us busy all night. Aha! Cried the inspector, making a note in his notebook. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you play so much. Don't be ridiculous, said the violins. Violins are the stars of any orchestra. If we killed the composer, we have to find work at square dancing or romantic restaurants. That's true, admitted the inspector. What about you, cellos and basses? The cellos and basses sighed. The cellos and basses are often weary from dragging their large instruments around. The basses in particular are so enormous, they can't even fit into a taxi cab without their curly scrolls out of the window. We were providing accompaniment, they said. You can't waltz without a reliable 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's boring, but it's steady work. Aha! Cried the inspector. Perhaps you murdered the composer for giving you such boring things to play. On the contrary, said the cellos and basses, we don't feel the need to show off like certain string instruments we could mention. Well, I guess that takes care of the strings, the inspector said. Oh, the violas. I almost forgot about you. Everyone forgets about us, said the violas bitterly. We play the notes and the chords that nobody cares about. We play crucial counter melodies that nobody hears. We often have to stay late after performances to stack up all the chairs. But we did notice that the concertmaster was acting strange while we were here last night feeling sorry for ourselves as usual. She was talking and laughing with the composer and carrying a strange black case. The concertmaster is the best violin player in the entire orchestra and is often accused of treachery. I was talking with the composer about my cadenza, she said, using the word which here means fancy solo part. I'd never murder someone who's giving me such an excellent opportunity to show off. You all have very good alibis, said the inspector, taking notes in his notebook. But the composer is still dead. Perhaps the murderer is lurking in the woodwinds. Where were you last night, woodwinds? Speak up, speak up. We We're doing bird imitations, said the flutes, the shiniest and highest pitched of the woodwinds. It seems like that's all we ever do. Whenever the orchestra needs a bird, there we are. Aha! Cried the inspector. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you act like birds. Don't make us laugh, the flutes cried. We're much too wimpy and high-pitched for murder. Ask the reed instruments. They're much sneakier than us. Sneaky? Said the clarinets. We're not sneaky. By the way, Inspector, that's a very handsome jacket you're wearing. Oh, thank you, said the inspector. Such shiny buttons, said the bassoons. You think so? The inspector said, blushing slightly. And the color is very flattering, said the oboes. Really? The inspector said, twirling around. That's very kind of you to say. Why are you giggling, flutes? Ignore them, said the first oboe, leaning in close. If I were you, I'd question the brass instruments instead. They're a violent lot. The brass? Said the inspector, writing in his notebook. You really think so? You can trust me, said the oboe. Everyone trusts me. After all, I tune up the entire orchestra by playing an A. You can't argue with that, said the inspector. Brass, what do you have to say for yourselves? Last night was an incredibly important night for us, proclaimed the trumpets in a boisterous manner, a phrase here which means loudly and with a certain arrogant rudeness. We announced the arrival of kings and presidents. We led soldiers into battle. We held a parade when they got home, and our ears are still ringing from all the ruckus. Aha! Cried the inspector, making a note in his notebook. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you play so loud. We love playing loud, the trumpets replied. Brass instruments are brassy by nature. Besides, loud is patriotic. And, well, we suspect the murder might be committed by the French horns. They're from France. The French horns they weren't listening. They were too busy talking about the best gelato shops in Paris. Leave the French horns alone, said the trombones. They were in such a state that last night we took them out to the party to cheer them up. We ordered pizzas, and then we took the stage, and we were swinging and dancing until dawn. We were there too, cried the percussion instruments, barging in as only percussions do. We drummed, we percussed, we employed xylophoniness and symbolism. We heard the beat the herd, we struck up, and we got down. We conquered the concert and battered the band and agitated the audience, rattled the roof, and got the phone numbers of some very attractive ladies. By then, we were beat, too exhausted to commit murder. What about you, Tuba? Said the inspector. Were you involved in these distasteful shenanigans? No, said the tuba. I'm a confirmed bachelor. I was home all night playing cards with my landlady, the harp, taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. The inspector flipped through the pages of his notebook and scratched his handsome head with a well-manicured hand. I'm utterly baffled, he said. I've questioned all the instruments in the orchestra, and none of them seems to be the murderer. The violins waltzed, the cellos and basses provided accompaniment, the violas mourned their fate while the concertmaster showed off. The flutes did bird imitations, repeatedly, and the reed instruments had the good taste to admire my jacket. The trumpets held a parade in honor of our great nation, while the French horns were wanting gelato from Paris, and the trombones had a lot of pizza and stayed up all night dancing. The percussions beat the band, the tuba stayed home playing cards with his landlady, the harp taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. But the composer is still dead. A strange noise caught the inspector's ear. Of course, he said. The conductor! You've been murdering composers for years! In fact, whenever or wherever there's a conductor, you're sure to find a dead composer. Beethoven, dead. Bach, dead. Brahms, dead. Mozart, dead. Haydn, dead. Schubert, unfinished, but dead. Mahler, dead. Chopin, romantic, but dead. Tchaikovsky, dramatic, but dead. Schoenberg, incomprehensible, but dead. Stravinsky, ecstatic, dead. Berlioz, dead. Purcell, dead. Prokofiev, dead. Debussy, dead. Vivaldi, Wagner, Sibelius, Ives, Handel, Britten, Mendelssohn, Scriabin, Liszt, Messiaen, Copland, Cage, Dvorak, Shostakovich, Ligeti, Lutoslawski, Corelli, Bellini, Puccini, Rossini, Scarlatti, Busconi, Boccherini, Verdi, J.C. Bach, W.F. Bach, C.P.E. Bach, Offenbach. Dead composers litter the musical world, and it's all because of one man and one little stick. Arrest him at once. Not so fast, said the entire orchestra in unison. The conductor didn't work alone. All of us have butchered a composer or two at one time or another, but we also keep the composers alive. Without strings and woodwinds, without brass and percussion, there would be no composing at all. Except for various kinds of non-orchestral music. If you want to hear the work of the world's greatest composers, if you're going to have to, well, you're going to have to allow for a little murder here and there. But that's injustice, said the inspector. Those who want justice, said the orchestra, can go to the police. But those who want something a little more interesting should go to the orchestra.